Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you for listening. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. Today, as of recording, it is Wednesday, March 25th. You're listening to this either Thursday, Friday, or maybe even over the weekend, since we're all at home pretty much quarantined across the nation. I know President Trump has yet to impose the national stay-at-home order, but a handful of states, like we discussed on Monday's episode, as well as quite a few cities, they have ordered stay-at-homes as recent as this week. From Monday's episode until now, the governor of Pennsylvania has issued a stay-at-home for all Montgomery County, where I live in Pennsylvania, so I will be at home almost exclusively for the next 2 weeks here, but that's no excuse not to get you guys quality content out there via the podcast. If you're listening on Apple iTunes or Spotify or wherever you're getting your podcasts, please share us on your social media pages. If you're on the Apple iTunes, you hit those three little buttons down the right, click share, go over to Facebook and post something saying, hey, if you're a baseball fan, you'd like this podcast, check it out. We appreciate it. If you are listening and you haven't done so already, scroll down, click the 5-star review. That really helps us continue to spread the word. It helps with the algorithm within iTunes for us to be on the up and coming or news and noteworthy, whatever section that they have within the iTunes podcast function. That helps out, as well as writing a review. We don't have any reviews written out there. If you guys leave a 5-star review, write a review, I'll read them here on the podcast. We want to engage you guys via social media out there as well. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Comment, concerns, give us a question. If you guys have any questions, hit us up on Twitter. We'll answer those. GSMC Baseball on Twitter. We'll go back and forth. We'll have an interactive segment here on one of our shows if we get enough questions. But the first segment here today, once again, it's the national news. Everybody's discussing it. There are no sports continuing to go on, so we'll just talk about the coronavirus in general once again. But there is finally good news that was released here as of Wednesday, the 25th. The Senate finally agreed to a stimulus package. This was after 5, 7, 10 days of negotiation back and forth. Both parties, looking at different situations. A lot of the Democrats want to make sure it ends up in the end users, and the word is the Republicans, they're trying to take care of the small business side of the economy. And after 5, 7, 10 days, again, of intense negotiating, this seems to be a bipartisan bill, meaning that both parties obviously agreed to it, not a Democratic bill or a Republican bill, but bipartisan. That's nice to hear in times like this. We're able to still come together on the same page and realize that the people out there are going to need this stimulus package due to layoffs, unemployment, and running through a brief checklist out there. If you guys haven't seen what's going on across the country, obviously it changes a little bit state to state. But nationally, some of the good news is we're going to get checks in our pocket. We're going to get money from the federal government. Now, there are stipulations. If you file jointly, it's up to $75,000 individually or $150,000 if you file jointly. If you're over that mark, the amount of $1,200 per adult will start to disperse and start to get less and less. But if you made under $75,000 last year, you'll get checks up to $1,200 as well as $500 per child. So me and my wife, my daughter, we're going to expect a little bit of money here. And then the cutoff they do have is you'll get nothing at all if you, as a single filer, you're over $99,000. You won't receive any of this money. And if you filed jointly, obviously that math adds up to $198, where you would not get any of this funding as well. But As regarding to a timeline where we're looking at, a lot of people are saying checks are going to be cut out in April, which means obviously with the federal government, give it a few weeks after that. Anybody who files their taxes knows it'll take 2 to 3 weeks for everything to process and finalize itself. So we can expect those probably the month of May, now that it's already the end of March here. Once again, the Senate has agreed on this, and there's still a timeline for ultimate approval. President Trump has come out and said he will approve this if it does reach his desk. But that's the other tidbit here. What we'll talk about a little bit later is where we go from here. But additional language and content that's in this stimulus package, a significant amount of money for all the hospitals and healthcare out there. Obviously, we're aware of those people on the front lines battling this illness and the lack of resources that we're starting to come upon, especially at these smaller establishments. Obviously, the big cities will be overwhelmed just due to the millions and millions of people and the lack of overall hospitals within the immediate area, and then the lack of resources within those hospitals. So I know a lot of resources are coming in from overseas. We've changed manufacturing plants. Some companies here in the U.S. have said, hey, we're going to start to make these as opposed to, our normal product, since that industry is deemed non-essential and has been shut down. So a lot of things are happening internally to help with healthcare and hospitals, and obviously this money for them to, basically that person or individual through insurance and just everything would be way too much. So a lot of money going into the hospitals and the healthcare vertical. One stipulation or kind of, I guess, snag in the overall approval of this package was the airlines. The airlines are going to get a big bailout, which makes sense, of course, because if you're told to stay at home, you certainly can't fly anywhere. And generally with, I think, 75 or 80% occupancy rate, that's what the airlines are running their business on, that profit that's supposed to come in. And now that that's at 10 to 15%, there's 2 to 3 people on every airplane. They're losing money big time with every flight that goes on there, with gas, salaries, personnel, everything, to have 2 or 3 people only making a couple of $100. But the problem is that this happened in the past with the car industry. Now, I was in college the last time this happened, so I wasn't as aware or present as a responsible adult to kind of see what was going on. I was just more worried about when my exams were and where the party was that weekend. But the cars apparently used that bailout to buy back a ton of stocks. They didn't use that correctly, and they still went bankrupt and still went out of business. Thus, obviously, the recession, because, hey, we already helped you once, says the federal government. We're not going to do it again. And they're worried that the airlines could take this same kind of instance as, hey, we got all this money, so what we're going to do is buy stock now that it's very low. And then obviously when it comes back up, we'll make more money. We'll help ourselves out. And basically the government said, hey, that's not allowed. You need to put this back into employees, resources, infrastructure, whatever you need to do. But this is the only money you're going to get. So if you screw this up and use it incorrectly, we're not going to help you out again a second time. And that's the problem, if you're looking at the market nowadays, looking at the airlines, if you think they're ultimately going to bounce back. I'm unsure, just due to the discussion around what's the correct word for it, where you get sick a second time, where it comes back around. We want to think that once it passes, we're going to go back to normal, but then you're going to get 400 people on an airplane, once again, full capacity, and it's not going to continue to spread if they're going internationally or even domestically. This is going to be a long time for the airline industry to bounce back, whether it's 12, 18, 24 months. I think it's going to take a couple of years, even until potentially a vaccine presents itself where, hey, you got it once, you get this vaccine, now you're good, you're never going to get it again. Because if it just continues to, be circular, go away, come back, go away, come back, this new way of life that we have, the travel both domestic and internationally via the airlines, may not be the way we want to go about it. So the airline's very much in a tricky situation moving forward. But again, we touched on it, but what happens next here, the Senate has agreed upon the stimulus package. They will vote as of Wednesday. That will pass based on the negotiation that everybody has been doing. Once it passes through the Senate, it then goes over to the House of Representatives for the House to vote on it. We haven't had any inclination on when they would vote on this. The general public, President Trump, everybody obviously thinks this needs to be done ASAP. Every day that goes by where this isn't implemented and the wheels aren't turning, small businesses are going under, people are losing money, a lot of bad things happening in the economy. And then if the House were to pass it, then it gets sent to President Trump's desk, where he has already said that he will sign off on it. So that is a positive, where we don't know exactly what the House is thinking. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, she kind of walked around the question when asked, hey, is this going to pass? How do you think it'll pass? Do they do remote voting with people being sick, not being able to be there in person? It's a very tricky situation, but I anticipate this being done by our next show next Monday, where we'll talk about, the finality of this, how it went through, when it went through, what to expect moving forward. But overall, good news, stimulus package. A lot of you guys listening to this out there will receive money from the federal government to help you guys pay bills, and then once again in the future, hopefully have some discretionary income to either travel or put back into the economy as we try to get back to normal here. But day 10, 11 of quarantine, we're continuing to push through this. Everybody stay at home out there if you can. Obviously, I know certain individuals don't have that luxury, so if you do have that option, please stay at home. Call your friends, FaceTime them, have a little bit of a happy hour via group FaceTime if you need to do it that way. With the internet and the technology we have, you should be able to get a lot of things done from home, such as myself recording this podcast here in my basement in my studio, still getting great content out for you guys out there. But that wraps up the first segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. After a brief word from one of our sponsors, we'll come back. We'll talk Major League Baseball. We got some updates there via the coronavirus. We'll take you through what to expect, some timelines, some conversations. So hang with us here for just a brief moment. We'll come back talking MLB.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello and welcome back to the second segment here of the GSMC. That's the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik, coming to you here with episodes every Monday and Thursday. Not a lot going on, obviously, in the Major League Baseball world. Nothing on the field to talk about specifically. We do have some injuries to bring up later in our fifth segment, which will just be our random bag of assortments for baseball to talk about here. But this second segment, we're following up on the coronavirus. In the first segment, I talked to you guys about the stimulus package that is in the process of being passed, may have been passed, depending on when you're listening to this, if it's the weekend already, the weekend of the March 27th or 28th. But an article that came out by Jeff Passan of ESPN and Major League Baseball touched on a lot of things that we have been talking about here in regards to the MLB and the coronavirus. And I know you're probably thinking, hey, Kev, a lot of this is repetitive week after week. But it's the story and the topic of conversation. It's what everybody's talking about. It's how everybody's trying to stay up to date, stay on the forefront, make quality decisions regarding logistics, infrastructure, back to play. It's not only the baseball side of things, but the business side of things very, very much being thought through. And this is highlighted in Jeff's article where he says the MLB and the MLBPA, they've been meeting over the course of the last 3 or 4 days where they are, quote unquote, juggling a lot of different topics. The first three, or the biggest three that they're talking about, are advancing player salaries. They want to make sure people at the big league level are compensated here for the month of April, as well as the end of March, opening day being tomorrow, I believe, Thursday the 26th. Again, recording this on the 25th from the home studio here. So if new information comes out Thursday or Friday, don't hold it against me because we're recording here Wednesday. But advancing player salaries, big concern within the MLBPA. Non-player employees will get paid through April. cost cutting potentially coming in the month of May. That will be an interesting conversation. They want to make sure everybody gets paid through April. In May, they're going to start looking at cost cutting. However, I know it's not entirely baseball related, but the Philadelphia 76ers, my hometown hoop team, very much ashamed to be a fan of right now and embarrassed, honestly, for ownership. And I don't know if they're going to recover from this in the public's eye, but they cut workers' salaries 20, 30, 40%, depending on your income, for the month of March. And literally 30 minutes after this happened, the net worth of the owner started trending on Twitter, basically saying, hey, you're cutting 20% from people making $70,000. Thank you, Mr. $2.2 billion in the bank. Yeah, we're really sorry that you're losing some money this month in the pandemic and you're going to take it from your employees. Well, it took all of about 12 hours for the city of Philadelphia and the internet to remain undefeated, basically throwing a big beep beep since I can't cuss on this podcast, a beep beep back at the Sixers, and they reverse course saying, hey, it was a wrong decision. We've realized that, and we have now righted it. And a lot of the other NBA owners, and I'm sure now discussing Major League Baseball, MLB owners are upset with Philadelphia reversing course because they were very much on the wait-and-see approach. We're going to see how Philadelphia reacts to this, how he's the owner of the New Jersey Devils, so I'll say the Sixers and New Jersey, the Devils. Not a lot of anger with the Devils fans. I'll be honest. The Sixers, though, we came in hot at the ownership and was not pleased with what was going on, as well as the NCAA. They came out in reverse course. Trevor Lawrence trying to start a GoFundMe for victims of the coronavirus, and the NCAA said, hey, you can't use your likeness to raise money. Are you kidding me? For the pandemic? I know this is a baseball podcast, but I just thought that was absurd, so I wanted to bring that up here as well. So everything coming around. I don't think they're going to cut costs in May. I know they're going to want to, but the feedback and the pushback from the public, I think, will make them reverse course. And then payments for minor league players were a big concern within the MLBPA because they haven't been compensated since last September. Like we talked about, they don't get paid for spring training. It is a per diem, per meal allowance, but not their salary to which they're compensated on throughout the regular season. So those were the three biggest ones that they're trying to iron out today, this week, tomorrow, to try to figure out for the month of April specifically. Basically paying everybody is what they're going to have to do. You just have to pay them for April and then figure it out come May. Hopefully we're coming back. Maybe you can delay payment. We'll see what happens. But they're compensating everybody for the month of April. So shout out to MLB for stepping up and doing that. The hope that we're hearing out of these conversations is to begin in early June or middle of June, which then gets us at a July kickoff. Like I talked about, I said July 4th is my sweet spot, my date where I think everything will kind of start to get back to normal. There's conversation around the All-Star game, July 14th, potentially being a way to kick it off. I don't know. What are they just going to vote last year's All-Star team? I don't really understand that as I'm reading it and communicating with people, how the All-Star game would be a nice kickoff. It's opening day. Just do it. Who cares when it is? It's going to be fantastic to see baseball. I know that the All-Star game was supposed to be in L.A., Hollywood, big money, Dodger Stadium, celebrities. Are you just going to say, hey, the best player from every team, come on down for a day? I don't know. I don't get that. But they're hoping early June, started off in July. That's what I'm thinking about. There is talk from the players that up to 2 days a week, they'll be willing to play double headers. So whatever that is, they're going to need a day off a week. So that gives you 6 days. 2 double headers is 4 other games. So 8 games a week. Let's talk July, 4, 6, 8. Let's see, 12 times 8, 90, 106, even with the double headers if you're starting in July. I know they said as close to 162 as possible, but as close to 100 or even over 100 may be a better goal here. You got to get over half a season. You got to play more than 81 games. That's how I feel for this to count as a legitimate championship. If the Phillies win it, don't get me wrong, I'm going to throw it in everybody's face like it counts 100%. But whoever does win this year, there is going to be a little bit of but it was only 80 games, and if there were 80 games last year, the Nationals wouldn't have even made the playoffs, and they won the whole thing. So clearly, is it justified? If you're that city, heck yeah, it's justified. And if you're not, obviously that's going to be your argument. But 2 days a week up to doubleheaders, maybe a Friday, Tuesday doubleheader at the end of the series before travel days. I agree with that. I think we are going to see more doubleheaders, 2 9s. No way they play the 7s like we talked about last week. But I would love some doubleheaders. If there's not going to be fans there anyway, you don't have to worry about tickets, day, night, doubleheaders, clear and cleaning the stadium in between games. Just play, man. It's like you're back in college, like you're back on the tournament routes there, weekend, fall ball, trying to show off with the showcases, doubleheader. Let's go, lace them up. Let's play some ball. It'll be fun to watch these guys, just get back to their kids' days even more. Of, hey, let's go, run it back, a half hour, next game, get a sandwich in between games, get back out there, play a doubleheader. So both sides have agreed to play into October if necessary, with playoffs possibly coming at a neutral site in November. That's, again, back to if the Yankees or the Phillies are in the postseason and they need to go play in a warmer climate, they could head back down to the spring training complexes to play, quote-unquote, neutral site, but a little bit of a home field advantage because of spring training. Obviously, you have fans of that team kind of hanging around there year-round or would be willing to make the trip, such as a spring training atmosphere. Playoff expansion has been discussed, not in a ton of detail right now. They're really going to wait to figure out how many games they're going to play, and then if that means how many teams will make the playoffs. The more games played, the less teams will make the playoffs, in my opinion. If you only get 50, 60 games, you might as well play like a World Cup style of group match to best of 32. Yeah, why not? Go soccer, best of 32, group play, round of 16, best of 3, all the way down. Boom. There you go. Everybody gets a shot. The people tanking, they're going to lose anyway. So not a ton to talk about there. But where the stalemate comes into play, the quote-unquote stalemate, that's the doomsday scenario. And that's the scenario that I talked with you guys about in regards to canceling the entire season. If we're unable to control this virus and get a season in, what do you do with Mookie Betts? The Dodgers, there's no way they're going to let him walk after trading these prospects and not getting a single game out of Mookie Betts. And if you're a player, you're not just going to let a year of your life be washed because, again, you'd be a free agent at 31 instead of 30. Maybe you get 4 years instead of 5, and it costs you $20 million. They didn't pay you during the year that wasn't played, and now you're not getting paid on the back end because you lost that year. So basically they just took a year of compensation off of your dinner plate, and that's where the players have a huge problem with it. And there was a conference call with a ton of big-name players involved, upwards of 75, 100 people, Sunday night, talking about all these different circumstances, all these different situations. So it was nice to see that the players are very much involved with what's going on, the Mike Trouts, the Bryce Harpers, the Anthony Rendons, all of those individuals front and center trying to figure out and make sure that we have a solid, structure moving forward. And once we get back humming and everybody's on the same page. But that wraps up the second segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. That wraps up our coronavirus talk for the episode. I know you guys, it's the first 20 minutes or so, every one of these episodes, but it's everything we got to talk about. Stay safe, stay home, tell all your loved ones that you love them. Obviously, everybody out there, do your part, wash your hands, stay home, FaceTime, video time. We appreciate everybody who can't stay home in the healthcare profession. Shout out to you guys who have to go to work and all the essential workers out there keeping the U.S. up and running here as long as we possibly can. But if you haven't done so already, write us a review, give us 5 stars wherever you're listening. We appreciate it. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We're going to pause right now for a brief word from one of our sponsors. Hang on the flip side, we're going to be previewing the AL Central. Can the Twins win it once again? Hang around and find out.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. Once again, I appreciate you guys listening out there. If you haven't done so yet, share this podcast with one of your friends who you know is a huge baseball fan, loves Major League Baseball, maybe is not a listener yet. Send them a link. Say, hey, check this out. My boy Kev, he talks to us every Monday and Thursday. He's got good takes, good entertainment on everything Major League Baseball. Now that I've gotten you guys updated on the coronavirus, you know, everything that's going on with the stimulus package, you're up to date with the MLBPA conversations around potentially starting up in July. We're going to continue around the divisions with my previews and my takeaways. In this segment, we'll discuss the AL Central. In the next segment, we'll talk about the AL West. That'll wrap up each division across the leagues. And then next Monday, I'll give you guys my playoff predictions on ultimately what I think is going to happen and who is going to make the playoffs based on all the feedback and everything that I've been talking to you guys about here over the last couple of weeks. So jumping right into it today, the AL Central. Alphabetically here in this division, starting out with the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox have had 7 straight years of under 500 baseball. Oh, man. I know that feeling well, rooting for the Phillies here the last decade. But, yeah, the White Sox, 7 straight years under 500. However, there were a few bright spots last year, a couple of them in particular. AL batting champion Tim Anderson, a young kid there continuing to come in his own, should be a force for years to come here in the American League. Hit everything last year. And I look for him to continue to improve this year. They also had the American League RBI leader in Jose Abreu. Jose continues to drive in runs, hit for power. He's not so much an average guy anymore, but still a tough out in the American League Central in the middle of that lineup. They added catcher Yasmani Grandal as well as right fielder Nomar Mazara. So they looked to the offensive side and said, hey, I got Tim Anderson, I got Jose Abreu. Let me add DH Edwin Encarnacion, who continues to be a bit of an ageless wonder. He continues to rake and just drop bombs wherever he goes. So now you got Jose Abreu, Encarnacion, Anderson, Grandal, Mazzaro. There you go. You got a little bit of an offense coming together, a little bit of a lineup there, at least in the middle of it. The heart of your lineup is going to be difficult to walk through once again here if you're the opposing teams. From the pitching perspective, they got a couple of guys coming off Tommy John that they're hoping to bounce back. Michael Kopech, Carlos Rodon, threw in an extra N there. He's coming off of Tommy John, so if they bounce back and have solid years, as well as they added 2 lefties to the starting rotation, Dallas Keuchel, he worked his half a season in Atlanta into a nice deal with the White Sox, and then they added Gio Gonzalez, who's been around the block a little bit from the left-handed side, but a professional pitcher. So the White Sox goal this year should be to get over that 500 mark. I think the playoffs may be a little bit of a stretch, but ultimately should be improved from a year ago. Continuing around the AL Central, the Cleveland Indians, they're actually trending the opposite direction. They had 93 wins last year. They were a wild card team. They had won the division, I believe, 2 or 3 years running until the Minnesota Twins finally took that title last year. They didn't make any big additions offensively. They'll continue to run out the likes of Jose Ramirez, Francisco Lindor, Carlos Santana. Their infield very strong and will have to carry them offensively. Now, they did trade Trevor Bauer, but the rotation of Bieber, Clevinger, and Carrasco, still a solid top 3. The bullpen, could leave some to be desired. They have a few good arms back there. Hand, he continues to be solid if he bounces back. So, strong names in the Cleveland Indians. 93 wins, didn't make any huge additions. Trending down ever so slightly. Once again, pitching should be solid enough. They do have professionals, but as a whole, the Cleveland Indians, I think for the first time in years, this is going to be when they start to come back to earth. And unfortunately, I think they may have missed their opportunity at winning that World Series when they went to that Game 7 against the Chicago Cubs, and the rain delay may have turned the tide and sent the title to Chicago instead of Cleveland. But, yeah, that's the Indians heading the wrong way here. Still potentially a playoff team, but not improved over last year, in my opinion. Next up, we got the Detroit Tigers. They should be bottom feeders once again in this division. Unfortunately, really not much to look forward to if you're a Tigers fan when it comes to baseball this summer or this fall. Matthew Boyd, left-handed starting pitcher, he continues to be trade bait for teams out there. If there is a trade deadline, that's where it gets very interesting once again with Boyd. If they play 50, 80, 100 games, when is that trade deadline? Will they be able to get as much for him? Because scouting could very much be affected with the trade deadline. I don't know if they're going to allow scouts to travel. I don't think people will be flying yet in regards to see this minor league player. It's going to have to be a local scout or video, and because of that, I don't think you'll see as much activity during the trade deadline just due to restrictions on travel and scouting and money and everything along those lines. So Michael Fulmer needs to be healthy for the Tigers. Jordan Zimmerman doesn't look like he has much left in the tank. Right-handed starter for him. He was in Washington for years. Standard, very much a professional, but he seems to be trailing off with the tail end of his career. And then Miguel Cabrera from the offensive side, he continues to slide down, and he's owed a ton of money. Him and Albert Pujols and Chris Davis are the three new poster childs for big money contract deals for too much term, too much length that the player doesn't live up to from the tail end side of things and doesn't give you that money's worth. Ryan Howard was that guy from 09 to 14. Now, Cabrera, Pujols, Davis, those guys as we turn into the 2020s here. They did add Jonathan Schoop, as well as Austin Romine offensively to try to get more professional at-bats. Schoop was very good last year in Baltimore. Romine is a professional, like I talked about, won't give away at-bats. So should be slightly improved from last year, but very much the fifth-place team here in the AL Central. Spoiler alert for my final standings there. But the Detroit Tigers are not going to be very good. The Kansas City Royals, they had 100 losses a year ago. New manager Mike Matheny, he comes over from the St. Louis Cardinals, managed them for a few years past, has playoff experience, is a very respected manager at the big league level. That's a positive move for the Royals. Their pitching staff, however, leaving a ton to be desired. They had the fourth worst ERA in baseball last year at 5.2, and they didn't do a ton to improve the rotation. They're just hoping that their internal prospects or their people that were in the division last year continue to improve. It's going to be interesting. They signed Maikel Franco from the Phillies, who was a bust of a prospect to replace Mike Moustakas, who finally moved on to a long-term deal. They're going to need people to step up. Kansas City, there's Duffy in the rotation, I believe, from the left side. It's just, man, Detroit and Kansas City, and Kansas City was right there in the playoffs, making the World Series. How the mighty have fallen for them very, very quickly here. And then rounding out this division, the Minnesota Twins, 101-61 last year. Their first AL Central title since 2010. 2010, back when I was in college, watching them play. Joe Mauer, he was probably still catching at that point. They were never able to make a run, but always in playoffs, always in postseason contention. Coming back to this year, sophomore manager Rocco Baldelli, he'll hope to avoid that sophomore slump for his guys, the adjustments that have been made for their hitters. They did add Josh Donaldson to a 4-year, $92 million deal. He's going to like hitting at target field. I know that much from the right side, hitting him up into that left field porch. So offensively, can they mash yet again? Kepler, who else? Everybody, man. They got a great lineup down there. But they did lose Kyle Gibson in the starting rotation. Gibby, good, solid, professional starting pitcher. They replaced him with Kenta Maeda. So that's probably a wash from the Minnesota perspective. Maeda, a little bit older, maybe a little bit less stuff, but less money than Gibson as well. So will they be able to hit Minnesota like they did last year? Oh, man, I think they're going to be able to, and I think they win this division again. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about where we see everybody finishing. I have the Minnesota Twins once again. Jose Barrios, him at the top of that rotation should be very good. And then following them up as a surprise. And number 2, I have the Chicago White Sox. I got the White Sox possibly in playoff contention. Honestly, I don't think so, but flirting with it based on some of the conversations we've had here. Next up, I have the Indians. Indians, you could put them second in the division. That's probably where the popular opinion is just based on years past. I think the White Sox make a big leap forward this year. jump the Indians, who continue to fade, and then rounding it out with the Kansas City Royals and the Detroit Tigers very much in fifth place, bringing up the rear. So the Twins, they seem to be the winner here, the front runner far and away. Then you got the White Sox and Indians battling for second and third place. But based on playing the Royals and Tigers, could put themselves in playoff contention, because I do think both of those teams lose 100-plus games this summer. Or if we played 162, I don't know what the reference point is. They lose, 60 out of 100 instead of 100 out of 160. But that wraps up the third segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We talked about the AL Central. Hang with us here for just a moment after a brief word from one of our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to talk about the AL West. There's some good storylines going on in the AL West. This year was going to be all about the Houston Astros and the sign-stealing scandal, but coronavirus came in and said, man, I got your back. You're going to talk about me 24/7. So we'll talk about that and much more. Hang with us here for just a second. Kevin Mahalik, GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik. Today's episode, Thursday, March 26th. This is being released if you're listening over the weekend at home during quarantine. I appreciate your ears. I appreciate you tuning in. We're recording this episode here on Wednesday, the 25th. Getting you guys the latest up-to-date information on the coronavirus at the top of the show, talking about the conversations that are happening every day between Major League Baseball and the MLBPA, everything from coming back in June to the doomsday scenario of no baseball across the board. A lot of conversations being had, so there's information leaking out, coming out week after week, day after day here as we try to work through this pandemic as best we can and get back to living our lives as normal as soon as possible. And last segment, I previewed the AL Central for you guys. I believe the Minnesota Twins are going to win that for a second straight year. They've improved, adding Josh Donaldson. I think the Indians fade, and one of the surprises, the Chicago White Sox. If you haven't looked at that lineup or that rotation, do yourself a favor and dive into that a little bit. They're going to surprise some people this summer, and I think finally take that step back into contention, even if it is at a reduced number of games here. But this segment's all about the AL West, our last and final division to preview here on the podcast, starting out alphabetically, as always, with the Houston Astros. 100 wins last year for the third straight season. They were defeated in the World Series, obviously Game 7 at home, the only World Series in history where the road team won all 7 games. That just doesn't make sense even still. I don't know how the heck that happened. But the Astros, they got a little bit worse this offseason. I'll be completely honest with you. Anytime you lose the best pitcher on the planet, your team's a little bit worse than it was a year ago. Garrett Cole signing with the New York Yankees. They still have Justin Verlander and Zach Greinke at the top of the rotation. This is why they traded for Greinke in the middle of last season. They knew that Cole was going to get paid and they weren't going to have the financial stability or opportunity to match because they're over the luxury tax this year anyway. They're going to pay that tax being over that $208 million threshold. But very much to be competitive, so worth that extra 10%. But they bring in Greinke, so the top two in this rotation, very strong. Justin Verlander did have surgery during spring training this year. That's a concern for Astros fans as he gets up there in age. Is his body starting to break down? The arm still seems to be there. Last year, his spin rates very much at the top of the league once again. Second in the Cy Young. Zach Greinke, very good as well. The top two guys, they will be strong. It's just a matter of if the bottom of the rotation will be able to match the top of the rotation and keep Houston in a lot of these games. The bullpen is very strong. My buddy Ryan Presley, Roberto Ozuna, Joe Smith, all back. Josh James back from last year's team. In the rotation, McCullers Jr. is the one gentleman coming off an injury who I didn't mention, who should help them out on the mound. But 8 out of 9 regulars coming back as well. Everybody except for, I think, Josh Reddick wasn't a regular, right? Maybe he was. I know he played. I don't know if he was a regular. But 8 out of 9 back, so they should be right around 100 wins once again. And I look for them to win this division for a 4th straight year. I don't know if they're going to hit that 100-win mark or, winning percentage, I guess. Whatever, 100 out of 162, that percentage is. I don't know if they'll get to that point, but I do think they'll be very good once again. Next up, the LA Angels. The Angels here finally trying to get Trout to the playoffs. They made quality moves this offseason. They added Joe Madden to be the manager of the ball club. He comes over from the Chicago Cubs. A new voice needed. He comes back home. He played and was in the LA organization for years and years, so he's excited to be back. They made the splash of the offseason when it came to position players, adding Anthony Rendon to the fold on a 7-year deal. So now you have Rendon, Pujols, Shohei Ohtani, and Mike Trout all in the middle of that lineup. Add Justin Upton if he can bounce back and have a solid year. And all of a sudden you got a lineup there of just dudes who can swing the bat. Rendon's one of the best overall hitters in baseball. Mike Trout's the best overall player in baseball. Ohtani showed disgusting power when he was healthy last year. Then he got hurt. So they're hoping this year, once again, he can start for him once a week and DH the other 3 or 4 days with an off day mixed in there as well. And then Upton bouncing back. From a pitching perspective, they missed out on the top of the market. They were going after Garrett Cole. People thought he was going to come back to L.A., being a UCLA guy, coming back home to the West Coast. But he went where the money was, and I got no hate for going where the cash is, that's for sure. The rotation, once again, Ohtani potentially in the rotation. Then they added lower-end guys like Julio Teheran and Dylan Bundy, professional arms, but not top-of-the-rotation guys. So the bullpen full of names that are, they're okay, nothing crazy here. So they're going to have to out-hit teams and out-hit their own rotation from day to day, and that's the only problem I see them running into. Look for them to possibly buy a buy an arm at the trade deadline if we do make it that far as a potential move to get them over the hump. Because the next squad, the Oakland A's, being an East Coast guy, I don't know how this team does it. I can't figure it out. Every year you look up and you go, how is Oakland winning 97 games? The last 2 years they won 97 games. I don't know how they're doing it. They don't have any names. Then you look at the stats, you dig a little deeper, you look at some next level fan graphs and spin rates and sabermetrics, and their rotation loaded with guys who are young and throw hard and fill up the stat sheet when it comes to the metrics. They got 4 out of the 5 are under 28 years old, and they're all extremely hard throwers. They all throw strikes. They got puck from the left side. It's one of those where they sneak up on you, and you go, man, what the heck? This guy's throwing cheese again. We just can't get a break here facing the A's. And then they're led at the plate, obviously, by the standard cast of characters. Matt Olson at first base, Matt Chapman at third, Chris Davis continuing to rake there in the DH, Tony Kemp, who they added from the Astros. He'll be at second base. It's just that they are an under-the-radar excellent baseball team. Now, last year they did start slow and came on late, so they won't have that luxury this year of figuring things out as they go. But they're certainly in the mix for that next slot there out in the AL West. The 2 teams remaining here in this division, unfortunately, I'm not sure are going to be super competitive this summer. The Seattle Mariners, for one, are in Tanksville. They're living with the Tigers, the Orioles, those types of teams, just trying not to embarrass themselves. They are, oh, God, I couldn't imagine being a Mariners fan. The last time they made the playoffs was 2001. I was 12 years old in the 7th grade living outside of Dallas, Texas in 2001. If you would have told me, hey, you're a Mariners fan, they just made the playoffs, the next time you're going to see them in the postseason will be after you're 31 years old. Like, oh, God, what torture. Not even make the playoffs, let alone win a title. Just, whew, gosh. And they are going full rebuild. The word is they're going to move on from Seager and his contract if they can. Kyle Seager, shortstop, as well as D. Gordon at second base. Both of them have 1 or 2 years left to get even more prospects to see if they can play. They got J.P. Crawford at shortstop from the Phillies organization. He's not going to pan out. People talked about him as the top prospect in baseball. Kid just can't hit. He plays a solid shortstop, but he can't hit, doesn't have the bat speed, doesn't have the strength. I don't know where that was all about. Like, ever since Double-A, the kid hasn't hit. It's been years. Oh, he's number one. He's never hit. It's just, I don't get it. So, they're going to be the youngest team in experience as well as age when it comes to the 2020 season. So look for them. Look for the kids. They're going to try to figure out who's who can play and who can't. That's really what this summer's about in Seattle. Not exactly winning games, but see who can play and who can't. So if you're up in Washington, it's going to be a long summer watching those Mariners play ball. But the final team here, the Texas Rangers. A little bit of energy coming out of Arlington. They got a new ballpark they're moving into. They made some moves this offseason to try to get the juices flowing. The rotation they have of Corey Kluber, Mike Minor, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, and Lyles rounding out the rotation. That's a 5 that's as solid as most or as any. You know, I don't think it's number 1. But I would put that up against a lot of rotations if you're going 4 or 5 deep. It's certainly deeper than the Phillies rotation. Mike Minor, Kluber, Lynn, they all got Cy Young votes. Gibson's a solid professional at a number 4. He was like the 2 in Minnesota, or the 3, Odorizzi and Barrios, then maybe the 3 Gibson. So him at the 4 here, I think will manage expectations even better and allow him to find his rhythm and settle in. On an offensive perspective, they added Todd Frazier, who will be their new third baseman. That's a nice move, a veteran coming in there, as well as Robinson Chirinos, veteran backstop. He'll be the new catcher. Joey Gallo out in right field. Will he continue to hit? Shin-Shu Chu, DH. Willie Odor, or Rahun Odor. It's a solid lineup down in Texas, where if their pitching comes together, they could sneak up on people. That's the battle that's going to be happening this year. This AL West, I think, is open for discussion behind the Houston Astros. I think Houston, they're coming in the favorite here. I think they win the AL West, but 2, 3, and 4. That's the conversation I'm having. The 5 are the Mariners. 1 Astros, 5 Mariners. The A's, Angels, and Rangers are your 2, 3, 4. I'm going to say the A's finish second just because they always seem to figure it out. They always put together a solid ball club. And then the Angels at third with their additions, their move, Mike Trout continuing to get better. Very much impressed with that. And then the Texas Rangers rounding it out as the 4th place squad, but better than most in regards to a 4th place finish. So Astros, A's, Angels, Rangers, Mariners in the AL West. Let me know what you guys think out there. Let me know how you think they're going to finish on social media. If you're not following us already, do so on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as well. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to engage, interact. Leave us a question. We'll do an Ask Me Anything segment on Twitter. If you guys send in questions, I'll have them answered, give you my take on what to expect here moving forward. But that wraps up the 4th segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, talking AL West, giving you guys a preview, my prediction on the standings. Hang with us here. After a word from one of our sponsors, we'll transition into our 5th segment, which is a little bit of a mismatch, hodgepodge of takes for Major League Baseball. No real structure. We're going to be talking about things such as how the big leaguers are continuing to work out, some social media guys you got to follow in the meantime, classic YouTube games to watch, a few injuries. We're going to talk about it all, so hang with us here. GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik, discussing all things Major League Baseball. We've had an excellent show so far for you guys. We've talked coronavirus, the new stimulus package that was agreed upon in the Senate as of Wednesday, as of time of recording. By the time you're listening to this, maybe it's passed all the way through the House, gotten onto the desk of the president. He signed it, and cash and checks will be on their way to a lot of Americans' bank accounts in April or May. We're all going to need it out there with the tough times we're going through right now. Then we discuss the AL Central. Minnesota Twins, I believe, once again will reign in that division, as well as the AL West, which goes to the Houston Astros one more time. Repeat division champions in all three. Yankees, Twins, Astros. The best got better in the offseason. I don't know how else to tell you guys, where there's not a ton of upsets happening there. The conversation that we're going to have next week, a lot of it is going to be about the wild card. Who's going to win those spots? Because those are the three. Who's getting 4 or 5? And if they expand it, who will be 6 or 7? A lot of different things to talk about here. But in the fifth segment, this is a segment, guys, since there's not a lot going on around Major League Baseball currently, we're going to discuss a bunch of different topics, a bunch of different things. There's really no theme for this segment. It is just, right now that we're going to start out with social media. Who you guys need to be following on social media, some interactive things that have been posted out there, like a lot of people are giving tutorials, some coaching suggestion for you guys out there who are home with kids. How can you help them in the backyard? Alex Rodriguez, A-Rod, he gave a very detailed video on Instagram, I believe it was, and a live stream, going through some long toss, then talked about drills, hitting drills. He talked about how he used to hit black beans with a broomstick. He would be in hotels on the road. He would order black beans or beans from the kitchen downstairs, get something out. He would carry a broomstick with him, or, one of those training sticks that are very thin, and toss beans and try to hit them himself. And basically said the next day the ball looked like a softball coming in there, because if you can hit small beans with a small stick, you're good enough to hit a baseball the next day. So that helped him get out of a few different slumps, and I thought that was an interesting behind-the-scenes look at what's going on. Next up, Nelson Cruz. He posted some pictures of his workouts, what he's doing down in the Dominican Republic. Nelson was one of those international players that was able to get back home that we talked about. They were worried about them traveling and then getting back into the country. Obviously, Nelson was able to get back before anything happened out of control, and he was doing a lot of stretching, resistance band workouts. It was interesting to see, because Nelson, everybody thinks he's going to continue to slow down. He was here in Baltimore when things were going well. Now he's in Minnesota when things are going well. He seems to bring positive energy and a lot of work ethic with him wherever he goes that rubs off on the kids, because he isn't slowing down. So for him to, show you that it takes stretching, resistance band exercises, and not just the big weights being thrown around, was nice to see behind the scenes. Harold Reynolds, an analyst for the Major League Baseball Network, he gave some drills, some hand-eye coordination, footwork, double plays, relay transfers, things along those lines, things to do at home, things to improve upon. And then a lot of people just posting videos of them working out and them hitting. And as a baseball fan out there, if you're a high school kid who's at home, if you're a fan who's, of any age, if you just enjoy watching swings to teach to your children potentially, whatever situation you're in, a lot of people are posting their swings to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, where they're working, at local facilities to hit. And, David Dahl posted some. Alex Bregman posted a few different workouts. Evan White, first baseman of the Mariners, posted one where he's got a tennis ball and he's basically hitting it against the wall, working on his bat-to-ball skills, his hand-eye coordination. So if you're a pitcher or if you're a position player, a lot of these major league players are posting what they're up to now, because people are going, oh, what are they doing? If they can't get to the park and work out, what are they doing at home? Hey, this is what they're doing. Mike Trout, he posted a video of him doing long toss, quarantine toss, as they put it. A lot of people are practicing with their wives or girlfriends now. Nolan Arenado, third baseman for the Rockies, he posted a video working on some drills online, 7 straight gold gloves. That doesn't happen by sitting at home. His cousin, Josh Fuentes, who's also in the Rockies organization, has videos of them, working out, doing things. I talked about Bregman. He's hitting off the machine for breakfast. per his caption. So basically, early morning workout, washing your hands. We got Aroldis Chapman doing some bench press. He's showing off the gym, cable lifting exercises, how he has his Cuban Missile nickname. Wilson Contreras, a catcher for the Cubs, he's hit Nerf bullets out of a Nerf gun from his roommates, trying to stay sharp, trying to stay connected, hitting a smaller object with a smaller bat, always a way to go. Let's see as we continue through here. Home workouts, people are posting them online. Lomo, Logan Morrison of the Brewers, Michael Lorenzen of the Reds. He's a good one to follow because he's a built dude doing it both, outfield and pitching. So a lot of fun there to watch. Next up, let's see, as we are continuing to just bounce around here, segment 5. If you guys are missing baseball, a ton of classic MLB games are currently on YouTube. Whoever you're a fan of, there's an article on MajorLeagueBaseball.com that gives you the 5 best games to rewatch for whoever you're a fan of, such as the Blue Jays, Joe Carter, Joey Bats, Donald Encarnacion, the Orioles. They got Cal Ripken Jr., Iron Man, Cruz in the playoffs, Tampa Bay Rays reaching the World Series, wild card tiebreakers. It's pretty cool how on Major League Baseball they've come together. They posted every game from last year or the year before on the MLB package or MLB TV, which is now free for everyone over the course of the next 30 to 60 days. So if your team was good over the last 2 years, head there, check that out. Me being a Phillies fan, I ain't watching a Gabe Kapler managed team over these last 2 years. The only game I may watch is the Bryce Harper Grand Slam that happened last year. That's really the only one that I would want to see. I don't want to get out of here these last 2 years. So these ones on YouTube go all the way back. I've watched Game 5 of the clinching 2008 playoffs already. You can go back to 1980 for the Phillies fans. So whoever you're a fan of, go to YouTube, type in Cardinals full game. You can watch the David Freese game. You can watch, them beat Kershaw. Full game Pirates. You can watch Garrett Cole back in 2013. You can watch back in 1971. Them win it all. Whoever you are, there's at least 5 to 7 full games on YouTube that are fun to watch and kind of click back on. And even stuff with 08 and the Phillies, I go, man, I don't remember that. Oh, okay, that's cool. There's little things you forget. So if you're watching it a third or fourth time, you'll catch something new this time that you didn't see in years past. But one of the last bullet points I want to touch on here is Noah Syndergaard. Noah Syndergaard is going to have Tommy John surgery. There's been a lot to make of Syndergaard, how hard he throws, how mechanically sound he is. Is Tommy John just inevitable if you throw 100 miles an hour? Or can the human body sustain somebody who does that? Syndergaard threw as hard as possible. He's throwing over 100 miles an hour. Can the human body physically maintain the ability to do that year after year, summer after summer, or eventually is a tendon, a ligament, a muscle going to break down where you're going to be required surgery? So Syndergaard was out this spring training with discomfort, and then now it's come out since the pandemic that they've talked to team trainers. They got an MRI, and it revealed a tear in the ulnar collateral ligament, the UCL, which is Tommy John surgery. So the discomfort was due to that ligament being torn, which now means his 2020 season is over. It's a 9 to 12 month recovery period. And the worry with Mets fans and just in general with baseball is that this is going to affect 2021. Syndergaard being a free agent after 2021, these next 2 years were extremely important to what they were doing and what he had going on in regards to possibly getting paid, getting that $100 million deal. So now you're going to have a Tommy John surgery, a missed year, and then only 1 year back coming off of Tommy John, where typically they're not lights out that first year they get back. There's command issues, there's pace issues, there's mechanical issues as well. They just don't come right back in where they were. So he's basically going to miss 2020, possibly have a little bit of a down year in 2021, and then somebody's going to get a deal on Syndergaard. Either he's going to come back and figure it out in 2 years, Or, he's never going to be the same, which is certainly a possibility. But last episode, we previewed the NL East. I talked about the Mets being second or third place because of their rotation. I no longer think that's the case. I think the Phillies are now able to jump the Mets due to that loss of starter, loss of depth, and put them right there with the Nationals and firmly in the mix for that wild card spot. So as a Phillies fan, unfortunately you never wish injury upon anybody, but it certainly helps the Phils this summer. And the Mets, just another blow. Like I said, they're the Mets. They'll figure it out. I don't know what it is. But that wraps up segment number 5 here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We talked about a little bit of everything. How the big leaguers are working out, who to follow on social media, games you can see on YouTube, and then injuries that are still occurring. Information still coming out about this summer. So Noah Syndergaard has to get Tommy John. Not a good look for the Mets. That's a huge blow no matter how many games they play this summer. But just a devastating bummer for the fans of New York and the fans of the Mets. So hang with us here, though. We're going to pause for another word from one of our sponsors. When we come back, it's our fun segment, our 6th segment. I'm going to give you guys my top 6 ballparks that I have been to. Last week, I gave you the bucket list ones I want to get to. This week, the top 6 I have been to. It's an interesting list. I think you guys are going to like it. Stick with us.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the 6th and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik, coming to you with 2 episodes a week every Monday and Thursday, talking baseball for you guys wherever you're getting your podcasts out there. But you already know that because you're listening to us here. Do me a favor, however. Share us with one of your friends. Head to social media. Share this episode on Facebook, on LinkedIn, wherever it is. I know you can hit those 3 little dots at the bottom right here under your podcast app. Go to share, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it may be. Actually text it to a friend. Say, hey, here's an excellent baseball podcast I've been listening to these past couple of weeks. Have you checked it out? I know you love all things baseball. It's a fun conversation with Kevin. Give him a like, give him a review. It really goes a long way. So I appreciate you guys, as always, tuning in here. This 6th and final segment, we like to have a good time. We like to have some fun. That's for sure here. And last episode, I gave you guys my top 8 bucket list ballparks that I have yet to see game action in. Well, today is going to be the top 6 ballparks that I have seen a game at, or that I have been able to attend in my life here. So from 6 to 1, starting out with number 6, we're going to double dip here, or triple dip. Let's triple dip, shall we? And this is going to potentially upset a few of the listeners out there, but I'm putting Fenway Park, Wrigley Field, and Camden Yards all in as one, and all in at number 6. Now you're saying, Kev, Fenway's number 1, Wrigley's number 2, of course. Well, that's based on nostalgia and history and the aura. But in terms of actually attending and watching a game, they haven't been the best experience for me. And I've been to all of them. I go to Camden Yards every summer, Fenway every summer. I've been to Wrigley once, and I sat in the bleachers out in the outfield. The upsetting part about that is you can't walk all the way around Wrigley. Either you're in the outfield or you're behind the backstop. You can't do both. So I've never seen behind home plate at Wrigley Field, which is like, dude, what's up with that? Let everybody walk around. It's a price thing. It's a general admission thing. So I had a great time drinking out on the bleachers, but I wanted to walk around the stadium and I couldn't do so. So that was upsetting. Then Camden Yards. Yeah, it's a nice park, But when you're walking around, you can't see everything. And then you get to left field, there's nowhere to watch the game. Whether you're at your seat or outside, it's one of those where it's a little bit old. It's a beautiful right there in the city, right against the building, the financial district down there. A lot of fun, a great atmosphere. But just overall, with all the new stadiums and the amenities they have, it's like, man, this isn't great. And then Fenway Park, personally, the chairs are old, they're uncomfortable, they're tight, it's small. I'm a big dude. I'm over 6'2", 200 plus. It's tight for me to get in there. And then there's also poles you got to stare around. You can't see everything in the game because the stadium was built over 100 years ago. Of course, it's not built the same way it was today. They didn't have the engineering. So it's old seats, tight seats, poles in the way. Great atmosphere. I've been there for ALCS games, watching the Astros the past couple of playoffs with my buddy. So don't get me wrong. Fenway is a lot of fun. All the bars right around locally, a heck of a good time drinking before and after the game. Same with Camden, same with Wrigleyville. All of them have great atmospheres, great situations, but just not top ballparks to actually watch the game as a non-fan of that team or, whichever team you're watching specifically. So the top 5, I have number 5, Coors Field out in Denver, Colorado. Mile High Stadium there in Coors Field. They have the purple row that shows you're exactly a mile up. Then they got the horseshoe out in center field where you can watch a game for $5, $10, $15. All the trees, the landscape kind of back there for the batter's eye. It's just a beautiful atmosphere in Denver, a nice city, a nice ballpark, very clean, very crisp. Just a lot of fun in Denver when I was there watching a game. Number 4, Citizens Bank Park, the Philadelphia Phillies. And this gets back to like Camden Yards and what I was talking about. As I continue to travel and see more and more stadiums, I find that it's unique in Philadelphia that when you walk around the entire stadium on the first level, no matter where you are, you can pause at any time, turn, look out, and see the field, see the game. There's standing room only, an entire 360 around the park. Again, in Boston, you go down underneath, you can't see anything. In Wrigley, you're in the outfield, you go down for a drink, you can't see anything. You're in Camden Yards, you go behind the dish around the plate, can't see anything. In Philly, wherever you are, even if you're waiting in line for food, you can kind of lean up, look out, and you're seeing the ball game there. So you don't miss any of the action. You want to do a lap? Hey, let's pause. Bryce Harper's hitting. I want to watch this here. Okay, let's keep going. All right, let's pause. Rhys Hoskins hitting. Let's watch this here. It's a fantastic ability to be able to do that. So I love the fact that Citizens Bank Park is just open entirely with that concept. Number 3 is the new Yankee Stadium. I enjoyed the new Yankee Stadium. Their food and amenities, top notch. What did they have? Sushi. They had beer. They had, not just beer, but different bars with local breweries, things like that. It wasn't Miller Lite in a can, or Yuengling in a can, whatever it may be. It was a lot of fun at Yankee Stadium. It was an open atmosphere on the lower level, such as Citizens Bank Park. You could see the entirety of the field. It's new, so obviously everything is sharp, fantastic. We went in through the players' kind of entrance area, so they had a little waiting area where I talked to David Wells, had a conversation with him, so that was fantastic, and just a great experience at Yankee Stadium, and I think would be a tremendous atmosphere for a playoff game there as well. That's on the bucket list. I only saw a regular season game there with the Astros up in the Bronx. Stayed in Manhattan, went up to the Bronx. Number 2, Target Field in Minneapolis. Yes, again, my buddy Presley was with the Twins before the Astros, so I went out, checked him out there. Gorgeous new stadium. My goodness gracious. And again, not being a Twins fan, just kind of a fan of a buddy, I didn't really care who won the game, so I was more impressed with their drinking areas, their lounges, their bars, their food, their walkways, their common areas. It was very beautiful, honestly. And then you got the city in right field up there past the walkway. You watch people hit home runs onto that walkway up there. You go around the corner, you can see all the games. The double deck out in left field. It's just a very, very well-built, well-positioned stadium right in downtown Minneapolis, right there in, the district. What do they call it? The warehouse district in Minneapolis. It's just, I had an excellent time out at Target Field. I was very impressed because I'm going, Minnesota baseball, it's cold. They had the Metrodome, what was it, for years and years? And it's just like, man, how can this be? It's a fantastic, beautiful stadium. And then wrapping up the top 5 or top 6, PNC Park. I touched on it with our food segment. I wanted to check that out. But PNC out in Pittsburgh. First off, the openness at Citizens Bank Park. Same thing at PNC. So the reason I love Citizens Bank Park is why I love PNC Park. same openness as well. Then they got the Roberto Clemente Bridge crossing from the city across the river to the park where all the fans come over. You can see the entirety of the city out in center field, right field. You got the bay or the river, kind of like San Francisco where they got bay shots. Well, you got river home run potential here at Pittsburgh in a beautifully new stadium. The food is tremendous. Good local beer section that, it's on the north side right next to Heinz Field. So it's great parking lot, great tailgating, great atmosphere all across the board. So if you haven't been to PNC, I would recommend doing so as soon as possible to catch a game out there. But that's 6-1. That wraps up the sixth segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Let's see. Fenway, Wrigley, and Camden coming in at number 6. Across the board, number 5, we got Coors Field out in Denver. Number 4, Citizens Bank Park right here in Philadelphia. Number 3, the new Yankee Stadium up in the Bronx. Number 2, Target Field in Minneapolis. If you haven't been to Minneapolis yet, get there. It's a beautiful city. Rooftop bars. How does Minneapolis have rooftop bars? Philly really doesn't. It's way colder in Minnesota. I didn't get that. So love the atmosphere, love the city, and then PNC Park out in Pittsburgh. Just a beautiful, beautiful skyline view to watch a game. You even forget the game's going on. You just stare at it like it's a picture or a painting for the most part out there as well. But again, that'll wrap up this episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. We appreciate you guys listening here as always, talking about the coronavirus, talking about Major League Baseball and the coronavirus, how it's continuing to have implications on the rest of this season. The doomsday scenario, obviously nobody wants to talk about where they don't have any baseball, continuing to wreak havoc. But I gave you guys a preview of the AL Central, the AL West. Next week on Monday's episode, we'll give you a playoff preview, and we rounded out this conversation with all things Major League Baseball and communicating. But if you haven't done so already, follow us, like us, social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, rate, review, share the podcast. I know I hammer you guys with that, but please do so. It really does help out, spread the word of GSMC as well as myself. So if you enjoyed your time here, go ahead and do that. But thanks for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thanks, and have a great night, everyone.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.